Good morning, I'm Meteorologist Steven DiMartino with Weather Concierge. We have a lot to talk about today as the tropical Atlantic has really become very active over the past couple of days. We have not one, not two, but three tropical low pressure systems that have organized in the Atlantic, and we're going to talk about all of that in terms of impacts on the United States. Also, we have a very interesting tropical disturbance to the east of Florence that may have some influences on the development of that tropical storm and also the development of the ridge that will drive Florence towards the eastern United States coastal waters. We'll also talk about what factors will impact where Florence is going to go and what you should do to prepare for it right now. So let's dive into the data and take a look at what we have. So as you can see here from the National Weather Service, we have a variety of storms here. We have Helena way out here in the Atlantic. We're going to watch this tropical storm very carefully, but it looks like it's going to be curving up into the northern Atlantic. Meanwhile, we have tropical depression number 9 that is likely to become a tropical storm by the time we get to this afternoon and evening. This tropical storm is going to have to be watched, especially if you're in the Caribbean, the Lesser Antilles, and then heading up towards, let's say, the Gulf of Mexico, maybe even the eastern United States. So this one is definitely one to watch out for as we move forward over the next several weeks. Meanwhile, we have Florence. Florence is currently a tropical storm with winds of 65 miles per hour, a pressure of 997 millibars, and moving due west, sometimes a little bit south to west, at 9 miles per hour. And this is our tropical disturbance that is to the east of Florence that is very, very interesting indeed because, well, let me explain in just a few minutes. First, let's talk about what Florence is moving into. It is moving into an environment that eventually is going to have less shear and also a lot of warm water. When you're talking about water temperatures that are ranging anywhere from about, anywhere from about 29 to 31 degrees Celsius, what that basically means is that temperatures are in the 80s in terms of water temperatures. And that is very warm water that allows a tropical storm or a hurricane to rapidly intensify. This is very, very impressive energy potential that we are looking at here ahead of this tropical storm. The tropical storm is currently right here. Here's where Florence is. And here's all of the very warm water that is out ahead of it. So as you can see here, the potential here for intensification is very well supported with this very warm water out ahead of the storm. This is actually going to be the warmest water that the storm has encountered so far since its development. It has been moving through some relatively cool waters for this time of year in the tropical Atlantic. It's been a major story for much of the tropical season about how cool the Atlantic has been, and thus that's been keeping the tropical Atlantic quiet. But we are at the peak of the season, so the fact that we have three named systems, or potentially three named systems by this evening, is not really a surprise. It's kind of like what you would expect for this time of year. But the key here is that Florence is about to move into a very, very favorable environment for growth. So when we take a look at the latest satellite picture of Florence, it doesn't look all that impressive, okay? A lot of the thunderstorms have weakened. The cloud tops have cooled. Now, this is really important. When cloud tops, should I say they've warmed, sorry. When cloud tops have cooled, that means they're higher in the atmosphere, okay? That means the lifting is stronger. The stronger the lifting, the stronger the storm. So as you can see here, we're starting to get some thunderstorms around the low-level center here, but you have a lot of low clouds, a lot of warm, low clouds associated with the circulation right now. Nowhere near what we saw just a few days ago when it was a major hurricane. This is due to a variety of factors. One, a little bit of dry air has gotten into the system, and also strong southwesterly shear. But the inner core of this storm is very much still intact. It has a very nice circulation here. You can see the outflow here. You see the cirrus here. This means that you're having the circulation cyclonic at the surface, and then to get rid of what we call latent heat energy, you have the anticyclonic circulation, which is this fanning out here. Okay, so that's all established. That's all there, ready to take advantage of a more favorable environment for development. Meanwhile, when we zoom out here, we have our tropical disturbance here. Now, what's going to be pretty interesting here moving forward is how this disturbance will be entrained into the tropical storm. And what happens when you have this type of situation, this is kind of like adding a lot of moisture and a little bit of vorticity into the system. So what that allows it to do, it allows it typically to rapidly intensify when it starts to entrain this type of disturbance into the circulation. So on the water vapor side of that picture, you can see a little bit of that dry air I was talking about trying to get entrained into the circulation. You could see the influence of the tropical disturbance here has not yet started to interact with Florence yet, but it's moving in that direction. Here is a trough that's producing the shear right here. This originally, a couple days back when we were thinking like, well, it could head towards the eastern United States, but likely it'll start to turn north. This trough was too weak to pick up Florence, but it was strong enough to create enough shear to weaken it. So unfortunately, that trough is going to miss. It's going to kick out. And now we're going to be watching here for a ridge, an upper level ridge. And here's the key to the forecast here. The development of this ridge is going to help to drive Florence to the due west. Okay, so basically if we draw a line here, okay, you have the tropical ridge starting to build here, and you have Florence basically getting caught under that ridge, moving due west, and then starting to curve around that ridge. Okay, so that's basically the forecast for the National Hurricane Center right now. The question is, does it move into the Carolinas? Does it curl up the coast? How does the storm track once it gets to this point? By the time it gets to this point here, okay, it's going to be moving under very favorable conditions, very warm water, not much of any shear at all. The only factor that can lead to this tropical storm being a little bit weaker than what we're forecasting right now, which is currently looking at a major hurricane, is if we get a little bit of this dry air here to mix into the system. That's always a bit of a wild card, okay? When you get some of this dry air mixed in, sometimes it has a lingering effect on the development of these tropical systems. So that's a little bit of a wild card that we're going to keep an eye on. Hopefully some of that dry air gets in there and it inhibits the development of Florence. But right now, the basic idea here is that this tropical storm is going to be moving into a moisture-filled atmosphere with low shear and a upper level ridge to the north of it to help to develop its whole circulation. And so when you have a major storm like this that has the capability of growing in size and in strength, well, it's going to be a major problem for the eastern United States. So how do you prepare for this right now? Okay, so first of all, stay away from the models, okay? Because as much as everyone loves to look at the models, especially online, especially spaghetti models and all that nonsense, it's good to use, don't get me wrong, but it creates a lot of hysteria. This is what you need to do, especially if you're in the Carolinas all the way up through New England. First of all, make sure you have all your supplies at hand. Hey, we're getting into nor'easter season anyway, so it's a good idea to make sure that you have your first aid kit prepared, you have your bottled water, you have fresh batteries, you have a flashlight that you could trust, that you're prepared anyway for power outages. I mean, we are moving towards that time of year anyway. But the key point here that I really want you to be prepared for along the coast is that even if this storm curves out in the Atlantic and completely misses, which I don't think is going to happen, unfortunately, but let's just say it does, well, it's still going to lead to major beach erosion, very strong rip tides, very rough seas out there, which of course will lead to minor to moderate coastal flooding. So if you're right on the shore, you need to prepare for that anyway. But wherever this storm decides to make landfall, whether it ends up in North Carolina and then heads up the coast as a major rainstorm, or it travels right along the coast like some guidance a lot of that is determined on how this ridge here is going to develop and the orientation of that ridge. So what the model guidance right now is suggesting is a landfall around the Carolinas. However, if the orientation of the ridge, instead of like this, is more like this, okay, which is very much possible, then it could easily just curve right up towards the Delmarva Peninsula. So I wouldn't let your guard down from anyone from New England all the way down to the Carolinas. I'd prepare for this storm and prepare with your supplies that you need anyway. But what we'll learn over the next 48 hours will be key to the whole forecast of this storm, which is the development of this ridge and the development of Florence. Until we get to that point, well, the best thing to do is just prepare, but don't overreact. That is your forecast discussion for today. I'm your meteorologist for Steven DiMartino. I'm your meteorologist, Steven DiMartino, for Weather Concierge. Thank you again, and as always, stay safe out there.